Hello everyone, welcome back to Lucky Crit. A lot of you guys really enjoyed my analysis of the brand new Three Houses trailer. If you haven't seen that original episode yet, you can check it out here, as today's episode is going to be a bit of a follow-up episode to that one. So definitely watch that one first if you haven't yet. A lot of you also expressed that you were very worried or had a bit of a negative reaction to the new Three Houses trailer until you saw my analysis video. So I wanted to say thank you and that I'm honored that you enjoyed it so much. I'm glad that looking a little bit deeper into things gave you a better sense of what the game should be like and left you walking away with a positive experience surrounding the game instead of losing all hype for it. With that said though, after the release of my first analysis, there were a handful of little things that I missed and some that you guys out there and on Reddit noticed. So for the sake of completely informing you, let's go through some of these new tidbits of info. To start things off, I noticed that some of you out there were wondering how to pronounce Byleth, whether it's Byleth or Byleth, the way that I've been saying it. I do think that Byleth does sound a little awkward and unwieldy, but that's never stopped Fire Emblem names before, so it's very possible that that could indeed be the correct pronunciation. We'll talk later on in this video about the origin of this particular name, because there's some interesting lore behind it, and that could actually end up revealing that it is pronounced more like Byleth or Byleth, which is why I've been saying it that way, but honestly, until the game is released or we actually hear someone say the name in a future trailer, we'll have no idea what the correct pronunciation will be. I'll probably flip-flop back and forth a bit in my videos until then. At least that way, I might say it correctly about 50% of the time, maybe. Or they could just pull a classic move and call Byleth teacher in every cutscene. That's also possible. Now onto the analysis though. A lot of you noticed that the pose that Byleth is in during this scene where he first meets Sothis is the exact same pose he's in when he gets quite possibly mortally wounded by the bandit, so I think it's very likely that this is the moment where he first meets Sothis. Perhaps she will unlock this latent ability within him to rewind time, and also ends up saving his life. This could be some sort of deal or agreement made between the two of them. This particular bandit that mortally wounds him also appears to be Costis, the bandit leader that we saw a bit earlier on in the trailer, unless that's just a generic bandit leader art and model that we'll see in more places in the game. So perhaps this is Byleth's first outing or mission as a teacher, and after clearing the map we get the cutscene where he gets ambushed. The cutscene itself does look like it could take place in a similar area to the battlefield with the rocky terrain shown, and perhaps after a battle because it's becoming dark out. Or it could be that Byleth and the students actually finish off Costis in a later mission after this ambush scene. Or maybe he lives after the mission against him and ambushes Byleth even later than that. This option doesn't quite work though, as we do hear the female narrator say that the event that unlocks Byleth's hidden power, which is likely to be the near-death experience and meeting Sothis, occurs before traveling to Garreg Mach. So maybe while protecting the three nobles, Byleth will be ambushed and attacked, but somehow manages to reverse time, live, and deliver an impressive counterattack, and the students are then so blown away by his counterattack that they tell him that he should be a teacher at the monastery to help bestow upon them his incredible combat abilities. Regardless, we're slowly unraveling what the first few hours of Three Houses will look like from the player's perspective. Initially, I was also concerned that it would be a very contrived story beat if Byleth already knew the lords from each of the three houses before becoming a teacher at Garreg Mach, but as a lot of you guys pointed out, it's probably much more likely that Byleth and Geralt were hired as mercenaries to protect and escort the three main lords to the monastery itself. So it's likely that this is where Byleth and the player will first meet and interact with them. This still seems a little silly though, as Geralt and Byleth or other members of their gang could probably easily kidnap them and make out with some pretty good ransom money from their families. I mean, doing that could end up starting a war with all three houses siding together searching for their children, but I don't know. It still seems really silly to not have any of the three houses' forces traveling to Garreg Mach with them, and instead they all just hired some randos for protection. But the more that I think about it, Garreg Mach is also outside of their domains on the map, so maybe due to a legal treaty or something like that, they physically cannot enter that land with their guards or soldiers. Who knows? Last time around, I was so busy talking about combat arts making a return that I didn't talk about the value 3 right here next to the curve shot combat art. Initially, some fans thought that combat arts costing HP as they did in Echoes might be making a comeback, but in this battle shot here with Bernadetta, we don't see her losing any health from activating curve shot, so it seems like these arts will instead be taking weapon durability as their cost. So Bernadetta here just expended 3 uses of her iron bow to use curve shot. This seems like a pretty fair and balanced way to pull off the combat arts system. There's also a little map detail here that I missed when they highlight the map to show the three major houses' territories. Thanks to Reddit user JessSpoke, on the west here, between Faerghus and Adrestia, we can see a small area marked as a part of neither country. And this is actually also on one of the major map changes that I pointed out in the last video. If we look closely here, we can see that this area is actually called Western Church on the map, so perhaps this is the neutral land of the Western Church of Fodlan. If you're quick on your feet, you might remember that we did see the protagonist fighting some of these guys in this trailer, more specifically punching them in the face with gauntlets, so this seems to have been something added later in development that will likely end up being a part of the story, or bare minimum, will be a mission that Beleth sends students out to quell and deal with some bad priests. But with each and every passing day, the church is looking to be more and more evil. Just saying. For a church that supposedly has a lot of influence over the world of Fodlan, it does seem like they possess a rather small amount of territory, so I wonder if they're in as a pseudo part of the Holy Kingdom of Fargus, or at least more a part of Fargus than anyone else. This could lead to some interesting conflicts later, with perhaps Dimitri having to face his own men, or his parents and their kingdom once everyone knows that the church is evil. We also now know by looking at a few of the new names upon the map of Fodlan itself, that the continent is supposed to echo the shape of a dragon's head. On the upper right of Leicester here, we have what's called Fodlan's throat along this mountain range, and in the lower left of the continent within Adrestia, we have Fodlan's fangs. And if we look at things a bit more zoomed out, you can definitely see how it looks rather dragon-like. So we're certainly not losing the dragon symbology here in Three Houses either. Reddit user Crystalescent noticed that the first trailer showcased 21 crests in total, and this time around we saw a total of 21 students. And we did also see in that first trailer that the three main countries' emblems were in fact among those 21 crests, so coupled with the fact that we do see Sylvain announcing his last name, Gautier, then Edelgard and company fighting the crest of that region later, I'd say it's safe to say this will be the case. This is a little troubling in a sense though, as 21 students isn't the greatest amount of characters, especially split between the three houses, so perhaps there will be one main student from an area whose crest must be defeated, but also other students that you can recruit from that same area who aren't necessarily the same main representative. We also weren't privy to a lot of the students within the trailer itself, so it could just end up being certain students who are connected to certain crests. Crystalescent also noticed that the product image for the Australian special Seasons of Warfare edition of the game shows some different portraits on the calendar. These characters appear to be the man standing alongside the Divine Saros and the as of yet unknown student sitting with Ash in the dining hall. We can also see, thanks to Vincent ASM of Serenus Forest fame, that the English and Japanese second trailers for Three Houses were also utilizing different builds of the game, with the Japanese trailer looking to have utilized an earlier build. This would make sense, as obviously it would be the easiest for them to make a Japanese trailer in Japan, and might take a bit of extra time for them to translate and localize the trailer for other markets. In this clip here provided by Vincent ASM, we can see that Bernadetta's inventory got a rather significant expansion. She gained a few more points of HP at base, as it would be very unlikely she'd have gained 3 points from a single level, and had her level reduced by 1, and either strength increased or the might of the iron bow increased. The terrain and lighting effects are also a bit different, with a rather large shadow effect now taking place in the upper area, and textures overall receiving an improvement. It looks like before, the maximum number of items per character's inventory was 6, but now it could be anywhere from 6 to 8, or even more. There's a lot of space. But that seems like way too many items, so maybe there's a good chunk of dead space there. Overall, this continues what I've seen to be a pretty standard Nintendo trend, with the trailers for different markets having slight differences and sometimes showing a little bit of extra footage here or there that the other versions didn't have. So for the next trailer that we get, let's keep that in mind. A lot of you also mentioned that it wasn't really a lucky crit for Petra, since she had a 100% chance to crit, which was likely just brute forced in by developers to show in there, because otherwise that would simply be ridiculous. But I'm offended by this, and I feel the need to let you know that every crit has the right to be lucky, no matter the percentage. You jerks. BRB, crying in the bathroom. Petra also required 110 experience points to level up, which is usually capped at 100 in the Fire Emblem series, so it's likely that there's been a significant change made with the level up system, or the amount of EXP required to level up characters. This could help to differentiate the visual amounts of EXP that characters are earning a bit more, whereas instead of units just receiving 1 EXP from a very weak enemy, they would gain what looks to be a bit more than that, though it still probably wouldn't be much. It could also mean slower progression, but we have no evidence of that just yet. Reddit user Blackjack15 made a good point about Sothis' attire, and it having the potential of signifying that she's bound or trapped somehow. Perhaps Sothis is the real connection with Naga or the goddess of Fodlan, and was killed, bound, or sealed away, and the current Divine Saros is a fraud or an evil decoy who will sow death and destruction upon the land. This would also explain why only Beleth can see Sothis, as she's trapped somewhere or perhaps even dead and gone, and he's the only person she's capable of reaching out to, whether it has to do with his heritage or not. As a side note here, a lot of people have also brought up that Beleth doesn't look much like his father, Geralt, and obviously has a completely different hair color, so while it's possible Beleth gets their hair color from their mother, I wonder if it's also possible that Geralt is not the real father of Beleth, and perhaps Beleth is more special than originally thought, hence the connection with Sothis. Hopefully not special avatar syndrome. But of course, all of this is still speculation, and we'll have to find out later. Reddit user Lemon Scented Landfill also shared a theory about Gambit attacks potentially being able to target multiple enemies at once, with the main evidence for this being this moment before Edelgard uses a Gambit attack against the Black Beast. In this shot, we can see what looks to be 2 targeting arrows above the Black Beast. Earlier in the trailer, we saw Bernadetta attack, and for her it only showed a single arrow for her target, and we're also not seeing any squares highlighted diagonally from Edelgard to show that it's a 2-range attack by default. It's also unclear at this moment if this attack is damaging the Black Beast twice or having doubled damage. If we're getting actual AoE attacks in Three Houses, in a similar vein to some hero specials, this will be a pretty massive switch up for the game, especially if enemies can use them too. We can also see that in this shot, Beleth, Edelgard, Fernand, and the other guy look to be in promoted outfits, and Beleth also has the special sword at this point, so it must be somewhere further on in the story. A lot of fans are also curious and speculating that this game could potentially have 2 major arcs within its storyline, as the whole Garreg Mach Monastery and teaching students thing doesn't really seem to be a long-term aspect of the game, especially if you're going to be leading your students into an all-out horrific war that envelops the continent. It just doesn't quite add up, so there is certainly the potential of there being a time skip, or simply the fact that the Garreg Mach Monastery will remain as your home base while the continent is plunged into chaos. There is the rather cryptic line from the first trailer that you might remember, which seems to have been Edelgard speaking to Beleth about returning someday. Very interesting.
I will return here someday, my teacher. Promise me that you won't forget me.
So I wonder if we'll end up seeing something like the time skip from the 4th Fire Emblem game, Genealogy of the Holy War, in Fire Emblem Three Houses. They have been bringing back some aspects of Genealogy and its midquel Thracia 776 throughout the past few main series games, like with first getting children units again in Awakening and capturing boss units in Fates, so maybe they're playing around with another time skip aspect too. Perhaps our young high schoolers, or college students if we want to keep it less creepy, will be all grown up by the endgame, or they'll all get slaughtered and we'll get to play as their offspring. Either way, sounds cool. Some of you also contested my point about them potentially using traditional animation in Three Houses to fill in the gaps between CG cutscenes by saying that traditional animation is actually typically more expensive than 3D. And this is generally true, and I should have elaborated upon my thoughts a bit more in that video. I think both MacV and Reingard here both offered some really good insight and know a lot more than I do on this topic, so thanks to these two. But the point that I was trying to make was that the inclusion of 2D animation in the Three Houses trailer, and moreover the game itself, seemed rather fillery to me, almost as if to cut costs from the larger scale 3D cutscenes. We won't have any idea of whether or not this was the case, or if their lower frame 3D animations actually are cheaper to produce than the traditional stuff, but it was my thought process that it would require a lot more to create the initial workings for 3D, like rigging, texture, lighting, animation, etc., and so maybe they opted for a quicker traditional approach that could be fulfilled by a smaller team at a potentially lower cost. However, the counterpoint to my argument absolutely does make sense though, as once you have the 3D models, lighting, and rigging set up, you technically have all of the tools that you'll need to manipulate and make any amount of cutscenes you want far more easily, whereas with traditional animation, each scene must be painstakingly hand-drawn, thus resulting in potentially higher costs. But they can reuse keyframes and have other tricks to cut corners there too, so all of this is more of a gray area in my opinion. In this scene taking place here behind Dimitri, we can see that they're using both a mixture of 2D and 3D animation. Dimitri is rendered in 3D, while this still unnamed student looks to be more traditional 2D. So if anything, I guess it seems that their usage is mostly a mixture of the two of them together, working side by side. Overall, it's not a matter of 2D always costing more than 3D and vice versa, it depends. The point of all of this though, was upon pondering about the inclusion of 2D here in Three Houses. If they're not doing these scenes due to budget, perhaps we're seeing them in the game to make it even more appealing to the anime crowd and attract the attention of an even wider audience. Bear with me a moment here. Fire Emblem has never had anime-styled cutscenes like this. Now, all of a sudden, with our much more Persona-like Fire Emblem, with students and classes and appointments, we're getting them this time? This has got to be some sort of decision behind the development of Three Houses, because if it's not due to budgeting constraints, it just really makes no sense as to why we needed these cutscenes when they could have just animated the already existing 3D models in-game, or even done a few more of those low FPS CG cutscenes and produced them that way. Now it's time for some lore. Beleth or Byleth, also sometimes known as Beleth or Belette, is actually the name of a demon king from the Lesser Key of Solomon the King, an anonymously written satanic grimoire on demonology. This particular entity has been known as many things throughout its various incarnations, sometimes known as having 85 legions of demons under his command. Perhaps this could equate to Beleth's students, and is also occasionally known as the demon of incest, or having the power to force everyone to love you. Did you think that the Fates fan service went too far? Because maybe we haven't seen anything just yet. Here he is pictured as a cat playing a trumpet. Yep, that's our Beleth. I'm wondering though if this name signifies that he won't be quite as good or innocent of a character that we thought he'd be. We've already had a twist where the Avatar character turned out to be pretty evil, at least in terms of bloodline and possession, so I would hope that intelligence systems wouldn't be treading the same ground again, but perhaps his powers are more those of darkness instead of typical protagonists being holy and light-based. If the church is evil, the holy group of the land actually being bad, maybe that's why Byleth, evilish demon Beleth, is the good one then to unseat them. He's also seen shrouded in darkness in the trailer, with darkness either being cleansed out of or emanating from the special sword. So perhaps while we, as Byleth, are the main character, it may be the case that we're a bit more of a main character whose powers are on the dark side of the aisle. Even with all this, it's still rather unclear as to whether or not it should be pronounced more like Beleth or Byleth, but a lot of these original names do look like they're pronounced a bit closer to Beleth than with the emphasis on it like Byleth, but it could still be the case either way. Pronunciation is hard, and a lot of people have a lot of very different opinions about it. Eventually I'll do another pronunciation video on this channel, but there's also a part of me that wishes I never did try so hard with pronunciations, because to someone out there, no matter how hard you try, you'll still be wrong. So, chill, I guess. But that is all for today. Thank you so much for watching the wrap up to the trailer analysis for the Fire Emblem Three Houses second trailer. What are you most excited about with this game? Be sure to let me know. If you liked the video, be sure to slash that thumbs up down below as it really helps out the channel, and get subscribed if you haven't yet to see more content like this. You can also follow us on Twitter for any Three Houses news and updates as soon as we hear about them. And if you ever want to have a much more personal discussion, you can join our nice little Discord server with a dedicated Three Houses chat channel, or other chat channels related to whatever you're interested in chatting about. I stop by there pretty often and we've got some really great users, so check it out. Lastly, I want to give a huge shout out to all of our amazing patrons. These guys help to make content like this possible. Thank you all so much for your support. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.